What were my biggest quantum leaps with NLP techniques, and what are the things maybe you have been going through yourself that you are going to go through pretty soon if you are advancing on your NLP practitioner thing? Basically moments where your skills look like they are just jumping in levels. You have been struggling for a while, you tried to use this and that, the switch pattern, or to change yourself or to work on your clients, and it didn't really provide any big help or any big change, not in yourself and not in people. And sometimes, once in a while, you have one of those quantum leaps where you just evolve massively all at the same time and you acquire a lot of skills. That is basically how the human brain learns, how the nervous system is registering information, accumulating experience, and making your level skyrocket past the roof. I have many videos on accelerated learning on this channel if you want to learn more about that. Specifically, what have been for me the three biggest shifts where my skills really skyrocketed with NLP. The very first one was about submodalities, playing with the cinema of your mind when you see a picture in your mind, how it was possible to just alter a little bit the lighting or the position of the picture in your mental screen, and how all of that is going to re-encode the bad memories you have, the bad feelings you have about things you are not capable of doing right now, or how can you bring more clarity about the problems, the struggles you have right now, all of that, and also shifting the internal states, running your own brain basically. There is this famous book by Bandler called Using Your Brain for a Change, where he says basically this is the user's manual for the brain that for whatever reason doesn't come when we come to life. When we are born, we are not coming out of our mom's thing with a manual. That just doesn't come. And that's the idea of Bandler, is that it is supposed to be accompanying you when you come to life in the beginning. So something to teach you how to run your own brain. From what Using Your Brain for a Change, the book says, or Bandler says, is that when the mind is not busy doing something, it will just get busy by itself on extremely stupid things. But being busy doesn't mean being a workaholic and always pushing more, achieving more. It can mean doing interesting things that are not difficult, but stimulating. There is a threshold here. It may not be challenging and difficult, maybe a little bit, but not too much, but stimulating and lightens your curiosity. Those things, when you can find more of those things for your own mind, your mind will just get less bored, and by getting less bored you will feel less depressed, if not depressed at all anymore, and none of those things will really happen anymore, because your brain will be going into a direction. When your brain has a direction, suddenly many bad states you're experiencing, like bad mood, negative state, or like kind of feeling low, sad, those things may just not even happen anymore, because you are giving to your brain productive things to do. And training yourself to use submodalities, what is described into Unlimited Power, into Using Your Brain for a Change, into Insider's Guide to Submodalities, another book by Bandler, all of those things really taught me to master my own internal states and to figure out how many times was I putting myself in a really negative state, but it was never really coming from other people that I was always blaming back in the day. Oh, it's this person's fault, it is that person's fault. It was never really coming from them. It was how I was interpreting what they said, or how what they said or what they did was making me reflect on something else I had done or somebody else had done. Therefore, I was getting upset. But it had nothing to do with that person. It was how I have connected the dots unconsciously, whatever. It is just an example from my own life, but everybody has those states, negative moods, negative states that are coming out of nowhere. You just sometimes are in a bad state, and when you train yourself to notice, pick those submodalities. How do you see pictures? How do sounds relate, echo in your mind? How do you process voices? How do you talk to yourself? Where are the feelings in your body? When you just elaborate more on those things, you will realize how many times you are getting yourself stuck by yourself without the help of the government, without the help of the manipulative people. it is just you in many cases. Maybe not all the cases, but so many cases it is not even about other people. It is just about how you have been reacting to that. So the big breakthrough for me was how to dissect all of those negative states with some modalities, because it was helping me to slow down and notice what was passing through my mind when I was in a very bad state, and reframing it, changing it, doing some anchoring maybe, or some meditation or self-hypnosis, whatever. But the beginning of all of that is the awareness you have of when you are in a negative state and what triggered that specific negative state. The second big quantum leap I noticed was, I think after maybe 3 years into NLP down the road, where I noticed how more able I was at using advanced rapport. And what I mean by advanced rapport is that you just see somebody or start talking with somebody and you already have an intuition for what do they need, how do they feel, are they in a good state, in a bad state, and what can you say to make them change or to alter their behaviors. If it is in a team, in a work environment, which is where this thing happened for me, in a work environment where you notice some people, you have to work with them and that day they are in a really bad state, learning to notice that first and to change their state first before they start working with you. Therefore, the whole experience will be so much more gratifying, because you will have less conflicts, you will have less arguments about stupid things, and you will just be in more productive situations. So the way it happened for me was by teaching myself to imagine I was slipping into the body and mind of somebody in front of me. So getting at this level of mental concentration while talking is already kind of a bit advanced. If you're just starting out, that may be too complex for you, or maybe you are just talented and you can do it right away eventually. It is just the way I train myself, imagining mentally I was putting myself in the shoes of the person directly in front of me. And when I started doing that, I had, first of all, a different physiology. I was changing the way I was standing, the way I was breathing, but not consciously. It was the only thing I was doing consciously was imagining myself in a split second going into the body of the person I was interacting with. And from there, my body was starting to shift slightly, and I was noticing that either I was breathing more shallow, I was breathing more like with a deeper breath, or I was not breathing at all, which is the whole thing about breathing is really the best indicator of which state are they into and which state are you into right now. If you have empowering breath, or if you almost don't breathe at all, it means you may be just tired, don't have no energy, or don't want to hear any more things. If you have really empowering breath, maybe you are in a positive state and ready to take action on something, for example. And when you get yourself into the shoes of somebody else, you just elaborate all of those things intuitively. You just notice, how do they feel right now, and what can I tell them to help them if they are in a low, bad mood, stuff like that. And very specifically, I was noticing the tone of my voice was changing. When I was getting myself into the people's shoes, I was just changing the tone of my voice, like matching theirs. Whereas before that, I had never been able to do that up to that point. Even when I was trying so hard, it was just never happening. Putting myself in their shoes, so changing the outcome instead of focusing on the technique, focusing on the whole interaction on itself. I'm getting myself into their whole identity, and I'm not just trying to match their voice, but the whole thing, the whole person. And my voice was naturally adapting to match theirs, and their tempo and their tonality and their whatever inflection, all of those things, I was matching that easily. And from that point, the biggest change is that people started getting way more friendly with me, and people started to defend me. If I was in a conflict with somebody else, the people I had synchronized with was starting to take my defense to defend me against whoever else, which I had never even asked. I didn't ask for anything, but in that work environment, those people I had paced and synchronized with that much, with advanced rapport, they just started to take my stance in every conflict that was happening. It was just making everything smoother, and I almost didn't need to say anything specific to persuade them or whatever, because the level of rapport was so high that whatever I was saying, it was passing by. They were saying, oh yeah, of course, for you, no problem. Even if I was asking for money or whatever, yeah, it's for you, no problem. I was not even forcing, pushing. It was just really advanced rapport and really created a breakthrough in my head to figure out how those NLP skills can be powerful when you really master them. And the last one, number 3, was when I started to do therapy with people and coaching back in the day, when I was kind of still in college, or like 1 year down the road after college, I think, somewhere around this, where I was conducting sessions and I caught myself, not even forcing it, but caught myself spontaneously using conversational NLP. So instead of using the protocols like they are laid out in the books or whatever, with step 1 you do this, step 2 you make them go into a sanctuary, into their mind, you guide them into a white space, a white room, whatever you are doing. And I was starting to use bits of those protocols, but spontaneously in a conversation. Very basic example, instead of using the dissociation pattern where you tell the person, your client, now I would like you to get out of your body and to see yourself and blah, blah, blah. You can notice how you look from the outside. I may still do that from time to time, but quite often at this point, I started to use all of those things conversationally, by saying, for example, in the conversation, while answering to something they just said, I was saying, and what does happen when you see yourself out of this? Which is a dissociative language, when you see yourself out of this. But I was doing it spontaneously like that without thinking, instead of having to remember in my head all the process for, okay, so step 1, I have to ask them to sit comfortably. Step 2, I have to tell them to look at themselves. This is good for starting when you just start practicing, but my big quantum leap at this point was that all of this stuff was just flowing through my mouth without me forcing it, without me even thinking about it. It was just spontaneous. Massive spontaneity, which means unconscious competence again, but I was even mixing tools together. Like I was doing a bit of dissociation with a bit of the Scrooge pattern, with a bit of anchoring, with all of those things together, and it was so spontaneous that it was really sounding like conversational hypnosis, the thing I started teaching then years later. It was really sounding like this because I was not even aware of what I was doing at this point. It was so spontaneous, I was not even conscious of what I was doing. But people were starting to change much more easily and faster. So yeah, it's just what happens when your skills become unconscious, when you start becoming really great at something, like musicians who don't even need to think anymore, they just play automatically. That's pretty much what happened for me with NLP, and that I hope can happen for you too.